In terms of what led the United States to take this action now, there have been some questions raised about the narratives here coming from the president and some of his top advisors. President Trump laying out yesterday that, in fact, it was their ballistic missiles that he said were nearing striking distance of the U.S. potentially. They served as a threat to the United States, and notably that they served as a shield for its nuclear program. And thus, that led him to decide to attack when he did. And yet, just a few hours later, Secretary of State Marco Rubio said something quite different. Let me play that.
We knew that there was going to be an Israeli action. We knew that that would precipitate an attack against American forces. And we knew that if we didn't preemptively go after them before they launched those attacks, we would suffer higher casualties and perhaps even higher those killed. And then we would all be here answering questions about why we knew that and didn't act.
Okay, so just a few moments ago, President Trump was asked about this, whether or not Israel essentially forced his hand to enter this war, and he said, no, if anything, I forced Israel's hand here, and reiterated his view that Iran did pose somewhat of an imminent threat to the United States. What do you make of these shifting narratives, and do you think the president did enough in justifying why he decided now?
Well, there's been a number of explanations for this. My sense is that there has been an expectation that Israel was going to take strikes again against the Iranian missile program in particular, that its reconstitution was particularly worrisome to them. And many of us expected that that would take place within a month or at most two. Then I think that there was a recognition if this is coming, and the nuclear talks didn't seem to be going anywhere despite what a third party said about potential progress. They were being stretched out, and the negotiators seemed to be playing our negotiators to a degree. And then I think there was probably a recognition that we had so much pattern of life information, so much exquisite intelligence, that if we struck, that we would be able to take out the supreme leader and a number of the other important leaders. And of course, that proved to be the case. In fact, it was stunning arrogance that the supreme leader gathered in a location that was bombable during daylight. I assume because they said, well, they didn't attack in the early morning hours last night. Let's get together one more time. They won't attack until the lights go out. And that proved to be obviously a catastrophically bad assumption. So I think it's a number of these different factors that all came together, and the decision was made, let's do it now. You'll recall that President Trump had a degree of tactical surprise the last time, and this certainly had that in this particular case as well.
And that then raises the question of what are the opportunities and obviously what are the concerns that remain if there is, in fact, a power vacuum right now for the country. Kareem Sajapur last night on our air said that the regime currently resembles a chicken with its head cut off. This is no doubt a zombie type of regime that, while weakened, still can do quite some damage here. What are your biggest concerns as more and more time unfolds, as attacks against regional partners continue, without that stable leadership that the West, that Israel is hoping for?
Well, I'm not sure that there was stable leadership prior to this. I think a better characterization, I'm sure Kareem, for whom I have enormous respect, would have labeled this as just absolutely hardline ideological leaders that were in place. But what has happened, as I mentioned earlier, is that there's been a delegation of authority in advance. By the way, there are other leaders stepping up and taking over. They all have deputy commanders, succession plans. Indeed, there's a three-person council that is, in essence, is in charge right now. It's the president, the senior judicial official, and a cleric who's been selected, who could be the next supreme leader, by the way. But they're not in the kind of active command and control. You know, they've got to stay away from any electronic devices unless they're very deeply buried underground, and it's landlines and so forth. I think the short-term concern is our ability to find and destroy the remaining missile stocks, launchers, and the manufacturing facilities for those as well, to really put that very substantially out of commission for quite a long time. And then to do the same with the drone capacity that they have as well. That has proven, again, to be problematic. Some countries have very good SHORAD, short-range air defense systems that they invested in over the years. It does not appear that all have that capacity, though, and that has been challenging, just as were the Shahed drones provided by Iran to Russia, so challenging for Ukraine. And then in the mid to longer term, as we are able to degrade all of these different elements of the regime leadership, the regime forces, and so on, can that be sufficient that the people with some kind of charismatic leader who emerges with real military capability? Keep in mind that sadly, in most of these situations, the side that prevails is the one that has the most guys with the most guns and the willingness to be ruthless in their employment, as we have seen from the regime forces in putting down the demonstrators.